Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us once again for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up on the hazardous weather graphic, winter storm warning continues here for St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast for snow and blowing snow with winds gusting anywhere from 45 to 60 miles an hour out of the north. That's creating occasional whiteout conditions depending on where you are here across that area, and that's going to remain out until 6 a.m. Monday morning. And then here for the western Arctic coast, we've got winter storm warning out for the overnight period tonight as well, and that's for northeast winds of 25 gusts 45, maybe 50 miles an hour at the most up there with again, that combined with blowing snow reduced visibilities to a quarter mile or less, or even near zero at times. And winter storm warning out for the central and eastern coast. Not as bad there. Winds 25 to 35 miles an hour in gusts, and visibilities reduced to less than a mile at times, or less than half mile at times in this area. And that's also out for tonight, due to end at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And for the winter weather advisory here, Noatak Valley, Selwyn, Kotzebue into Ambler. That's out until 6 p.m. on Monday here, and that's for snow, blowing snow, same conditions. Visibility is reduced, a little more snow falling in these areas, and pretty continuous as well. And also for the Koyukuk Valley, Bettles, winter weather advisory out, and then along the southeastern Brooks Range to Arctic Village. This is out until probably at least until Tuesday morning, I believe, through Monday night in these zones. And moving on to satellite imagery, we've got a system here coming southward. Actually, several kind of circulations caught up in this. The main low, actually surface low, pulling northward, but the front here pushing right across the southeast coast today. High wind warnings down over the southern panhandle due to end in the next couple hours of those 40 gust, 65 mile an hour winds today, with rain heavy at times still occurring down there around Ketchikan and Annette, and lightening up a little bit here up to the north. You can see breaking out, actually becoming more showery along the central coast, and north coast still pretty rainy there, with nearly an inch of rain falling across the entire area there. Across, not everywhere got an inch of rain, but nearly an inch falling from the southern panhandle back up towards Yakutat, and lighter amounts, but still not too bad, anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to maybe an inch at the most here for the North Gulf Coast, with the moisture there. On the chart today, you can see the front pushing through, and yet though another trough keeping it wet up on the north coast, so that gave a pretty good distribution of rainfall here across the area in the last 12 to 24 hours. A little more showery, Kodiak Island, packed with that southwest flow, southwest wind. East side of Kodiak State Airport, for example, reporting dry conditions all afternoon with the showers back on the other side of the island, and rain here over Bristol Bay, still southerly flow, keeping the temperatures in the mid to upper 30s this afternoon, all the way up into the Kuskokwim Delta, in some cases even farther in some areas there. And then maybe some mixture of rain or snow showers on the western Alaska range, but that'll all rain down toward Iliamna and Kamishak Bay, as well as the Kenai Peninsula area, and on up into Prince William Sound. And the winds, though, really coming down from what they were yesterday and overnight last night, especially along the Brooks, or especially along the Alaska range there, much lighter than what you saw yesterday, and some sunshine breaking out over the Tanana Valley, 40-mile country on up toward Eagle, and into the upper Yukon Valley as this front lifts northward and gets some drier air there, with all the moisture getting hung up along and south of the, if not the coast range, then the Alaska range. Low center tracking northward here. Weakening slowly, still about 965 millibars. Now producing winds gusts to 55 to 60 miles an hour this afternoon, St. Lawrence Island. Snow and blowing snow there. On up into the Bering Strait around Tin City, and you see quite a tight gradient up here across the northwest part of the state, northwest coast. And we're seeing winds gusts to about 50 miles an hour at Point Hope. And that's coming all the way down, taking more of a northwesterly direction here as it gets to the Perlos. St. Paul, 46 mile an hour wind gusts with rain and snow changing to just snow this afternoon. Temperatures now down around 30 degrees as that cold air continues to move southward across the Bering, and eventually it'll pull eastward. And actually, snowfall levels aren't all that high here, even in where I got the green shaded areas. But conditions improve. Showers taper off toward Adak and Atka. Kind of a mixture of rain and snow around Adak today, tapering off. Next system there to the west, just south of the Aleutians. Not all that strong, but it's going to take a track eastward here, and that'll bring some more moisture back into the central Aleutians. Winds, as you can see, not much of a gradient associated with it at this point in time, so that's not going to be much of a factor wind-wise, and only light precipitation. Short weak ridging here in advance of that, drying it out for the eastern Aleutians later tonight. Otherwise, look for snow or the precipitation trending towards snow down to sea level for the Alaska Peninsula, and this low continues to weaken over the southwest here. And so that'll produce periods of snow, but the gradient pretty slack around the low center. You got to get it back out towards St. Lawrence Island, back to the north there through the Bering Strait. That's where the gradient's the tightest. That's what, that's where the winds will be the strongest. Even the western Brooks Range here, always sharp on a Sunday when you go to daylight time. And then, but then you can see some blowing snow through the passes there, and snow will extend all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. Mostly dry here over the central eastern interior areas and North Gulf Coast. Still a chance of rain or snow tonight. Kodiak Island, rain or snow showers. Rain lightening up and the winds lightening up as well for the entire southeast coast. For tomorrow, I'll look for more of a showery condition there across the panel. Definitely much lighter winds and rain or snow with this trough here moving up to the North Gulf Coast areas, but generally dry over the eastern interior. And the Arctic boundary here, most of the precipitation will occur along and to the north or to the west of that feature, except for the low center here, keeping periods of snow over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, even the lower Yukon Valley, and snow showers into the Kuskokwim Valley. Starting to clear out, dry out here, central southern Cook Inlet, batch of moisture tracking eastward. Could see some snow, but amounts won't be all that much here across Cook Inlet when it gets into the Matanuska Valley. Copper River Basin, don't look for a whole lot either. And still areas of blowing snow through the passes of the Brooks Range, but improving here, St. Lawrence Island. This system taking a turn to the north a little bit, or actually to the northeast tomorrow, and probably got small craft advisory level winds here into the Alaska Peninsula, but pretty light winds comparatively for the eastern Aleutians, Adak and Atka. Even west of there, north maybe 25 to 30 at the most, with it drying out and beginning to clear out. Arctic front here, this still cold air, winds pushing cold air southward. So periods of snow, you're kind of right on the edge again. You'll dry out tonight over the Pribilos, but then maybe some more coming down around that. Definitely the winds lightening up as the trough axis shifts eastward and this low fills, but still quite windy in the northwest. And for the outlook on Tuesday, drying out, but still onshore flow here. A couple of weak troughs aloft moving through. Got some ridging building off the coast, but you'll still be be cloudy with showery conditions, but diminishing throughout the day. Basically dry over the southeast interior, and that storm tracks up into Bristol Bay from the eastern Aleutians tomorrow into Bristol Bay on Tuesday, and that's going to again increase southeast flow here across the areas from the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island for more rain there. And that's going to put the brakes on this Arctic boundary here from coming any farther south and begin to pull it back more to the west and then to the south here with the cold air out over the Bering Sea. Coming down toward the Aleutians, of course, snow showers out there. Still some snow at St. Lawrence Island, but the wind's a lot lighter now, as you can see, maybe down to 15 to 20 at most. And same thing for the Seward Peninsula. Still a tight gradient along the Brooks Range for gusty winds through the passes with blowing snow. And again, the snow falling along and to the north of this Arctic boundary, but maybe clearing out in the central Arctic coastal areas as well as the far western Aleutians. And taking a look at low temperatures for tonight, 10 to 15 below for the Arctic coast, to go along with the wind and snow up there, and single numbers into the lower teens, upper Yukon Valley, but still quite mild, upper 20s to lower 30s for the southwest interior areas, and falling into the lower 20s for the Pribilofs, 30s near 40 for the Panhandle, upper 20s south central Alaska. Highs tomorrow 35 to 42 southern Alaska here, upper 30s or mid to upper 30s Bristol Bay, into the teens for St. Lawrence Island, below zero on the Arctic coast, 40s for the southeast coast and the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak. And then down to, say, 15 to 20, 21 or 2 below for the Arctic coast on Tuesday morning. Otherwise, by contrast, 30s for the Panhandle and low to mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid 20s, south central Alaska. And for the highs, Tuesday afternoon, shaping up like this, mid 30s southern Alaska, 40s in the Panhandle, below zero on the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Big batch IFR here, southwest interior, actually pushing in toward the central interior, up and just past the Alaska Range, back out to St. Lawrence Island. Another area up there over the North Slope, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, smaller zone of IFR, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and actually that extends into much of the Panhandle, and another band out there over the Bering Sea with the next front. And you can see that slips up to the northeast tomorrow afternoon, coming across the eastern Aleutians there, but staying south of the Pribilofs. Otherwise, a lot of marginal conditions out here in the west. IFR there from the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, right up northeast to the Brooks Range in the far eastern Beaufort Sea coast, improving back to the west here a little bit, and becoming VFR, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley area, Matanuska Valley, and IFR holding here from now about Cape Yakataga over toward in and across the northern Panhandle, marginal down to the south. Monday morning or Tuesday morning, IFR over the southeast coast and IFR Kodiak, south side of the Alaska Peninsula to Unalaska Island. Also up here, Togiak Bay area, otherwise marginal VFR, much of the interior, IFR, Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley, Selawik, Kotzebue, up across the Brooks Range to the North Slope. And then for the afternoon, marginal VFR here, western half of the state, with areas of IFR scattered around, and that becomes a little more isolated IFR-wise here, south central Alaska, otherwise marginal VFR for the Panhandle, VFR there in the Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and marginal VFR, all the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And in Tuvik tomorrow, easy IFR there, and same forecast for Adigan, IFR the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill look to be IFR at times, and rainy, IFR becoming marginal VFR. And for Windy, marginal VFR becoming VFR, and Isabel, IFR becoming marginal in the afternoon. And for Mintess, I think you'll stay VFR the entire day. And Tanita, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And for Portage, IFR trending toward, well, actually, it could be a pretty good improvement in Portage tomorrow afternoon, going through marginal VFR and maybe even possibly VFR late in the day. Chilkoot and White holding in the IFR zone. Freezing levels at the surface here, right near the Pribilofs now, well north of the Aleutians, cutting in across northern Bristol Bay, up along the coast as it seems to always be, and then down and along the eastern part of the Panhandle, 2,000 feet way down there near the Queen Charlottes. And then for icing, areas of here below 4,000 feet, light rime icing, maybe mixed here, southwest interior, up along that Arctic boundary and off to the northeast to the eastern Arctic coast. Another batch here, possible mixed icing, nothing serious at all, no moderate, just areas of light. And a little more significant here for the North Gulf Coast, could be some areas of considerable moderate above 4,000 feet, northern Panhandle and into the eastern North Gulf Coast areas. But that's about it, above 5,000 feet. Jet stream, cold upper trough here from the Arctic, kind of supporting that Arctic frontal boundary up here across the Brooks Range or in the northern interior. Otherwise, trough Bering Sea Aleutians and trough moving through a weaker trough moving into the southeast coastal areas there. 9,000 foot winds showing this low center drifting northward to about this position tomorrow afternoon. And pretty light winds to the east and northeast of that center. A little stronger here, 20 to 25 across the Bering Strait, and then much stronger across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, 35 to 45 knots there. That blows right across Kodiak Island, 15 to 20 south central Alaska, and 15 to 20 into the southeast coast. Out to the west on the backside of this system, not too bad, 15 to 25 knot winds, maybe 35 there in advance of it. And at 3,000 feet, 20 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, pick up to 40 knots Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay, 25 knots over the southwest interior, north to northwest, 20 to 30 out there over the western Aleutians. And then light winds from the south are variable here, 10 to 15 knots, but northeasterlies 45 knots there, 40 to 45 from the northwest coast on down, diminishing for St. Lawrence Island. Turbulence with that, occasional moderate chop up there in the northwest through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island and from Kodiak and along the Alaska Peninsula.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things, coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the northern lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the northern lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business, But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today showing an increase here due to the north winds blowing ice southward, and also starting to form here, and that's going to continue for the next 4 or 5 days anyway. Here across the northern, you see a return of the sea ice in this area. Also some new stuff showing up along the Yukon Delta coast, right in there today. Otherwise, pretty slack down to the south. And for the coastal water forecast, lighter winds coming in for the Panhandle tonight and continuing through tomorrow. Southwest 20 along the coast. Still looking at some gale force gusts. Stevens Passage, channeled areas of the inside waters always have higher gusts. Southeast 20, Clarence Strait, still 30 knots there in Lynn Canal. And for Tuesday, west winds, 25 knots all along the coast, seas 15 to 18 feet. South 15, Clarence Strait, pick it up to 20 in Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, south 25. And for Cook Inlet, south to southwest, 25 knots with small craft advisories all the way down to Kamishak Bay. Westerlies 25 to 30 here, Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast. Turn southwest, drop down to 20 knots on the east side. Southeast 20 for Prince William Sound. Those even lighter coming into Tuesday, variable to east at 10, seas 2 feet. Southwest 25, eastern North Gulf Coast. Southwest 20 here to the west. Turn south at 20 for the Barren Islands. And then back to the east winds, 25 knots here for Kamishak Bay with 6-foot seas. Southeast, southern Cook Inlet, east 15 for northern Cook Inlet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, westerlies 30 to 35 knots there out of with 17-foot seas. And then westerly gales here, southwest of Sitkinak and the Alaska Peninsula, all west 35 knots. Throw Bristol Bay in that too with seas 14 to 16 feet. And for Tuesday, southeast 25 here for Bristol Bay, southwest 25 to 30 for the Alaska Peninsula, and turning south at 30 southwest of Sitkinak, south 25, Shelikof Strait, Kodiak Island, with seas here on the east side, Pacific side, up to 12 feet. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, south to southeast more or less here, 25 to 30 knots, seas running 11 to 16 feet. And then small craft advisories here also for the Central Aleutians, Bering Sea side of the islands, east at 30, in the Pacific side, southwest 30. with 10 to 14 foot seas, and then northerlies, gale force northerlies here west of Adak to about Kiska. Then they drop back down to 25 knots from Kiska to Shemya. And for Tuesday, northwest 20 there west of Kiska, and 25 knot winds picking up to 30 knots here as you get past Adak in toward Atka, all the way over to Nikolsky and Unmak Island, northwest 25 for Unalaska Island. And the southwest coast, we've got gales tomorrow south of Nunivak Island, west 35 knots, northwest 25 north of the island, back into 35 knot gales there for St. Lawrence Island. And that falls back to 25 here around St. Matthew Island, west 25 for the Pribilofs. And for Tuesday, gales continue here for St. Lawrence Island, 35 knots out of the north, but really drop down here towards St. Nunivak Island, north at 20, south northeast 20 here for Kamishak Bay, northwest 20 for the Pribilofs. And up along the Beaufort Sea coast, we got brisk wind advisories, north winds 25 knots from Demarcation Point here to the central coast. And then you get down around Point Lay and they become more northeasterly and pick up to 30 knots. And from Cape Thompson to Wales, we've got gale force 40 knot winds in the forecast. And then those still gales on Tuesday, but 35 knots northeast, Wales to Cape Beaufort. Brisk wind advisories now 25 knot winds on the west side, but the central and east coast, a lot lighter winds with north to northeast breeze at 10. And for tonight, this low drifting northward should keep snow, especially change the snow here as the cold air comes in around with it lifting northward into the Kuskokwim Delta, eventually into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, quite wet conditions, the Gulf of Alaska. So even though this front's moving off and the winds are coming down, it's going to stay on the at the minimum, the numerous showery side here for the southeast coast. Mixture of rain or snow, snowfall levels trying to fall, but having a hard time doing it with continued southerly flow. Up here, winter storm warnings tonight, St. Lawrence Island and the western Arctic coast. Still snowy tomorrow. And the outlook for Tuesday, next low pulls into Bristol Bay, and snow and blowing snow along the Brooks Range, drier in the Panhandle. And out in the Aleutians, colder with snow showers.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.